What is up, everybody? You are listening to another episode of the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, a part of the Odyssey Network. I am Brian Renick, and I am joined by our international man over there, Zain Naqvi. Zain, you are in the Great White North, or the Great Smoky North, if you will. Apparently, up there in Canada. How are things going outside of? As I can tell, and maybe people can as they listen, seems like you're a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, like just playing hurt here, trying to bang out some content in the off season. It's our favorite thing to do. So with the lack of news and all that stuff coming out, but no, man, love Toronto. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite Canadian cities, man. They treat me well here. It's great. Love it here.
Nice. Speaking of playing hurt, there's a little bit of news in 49ers land. The rookies reported today for camp. Veterans don't report until next week, but the rookies reported, and after that, the 49ers placed cornerback Darrell Luter Jr., who they drafted in the 5th round out of South Alabama. They placed him on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, but nobody knows why, and none of that information has come out yet. But hopefully this is a but that's about it for news. How concerned are you hearing about Luter's injury?
I mean, it puts more pressure on the starters are solidified, right? We know that Deontay Lenore and Mooney Ward are going to be the starters, and you know that Isaiah Oliver is going to be in the slot. So it really just puts pressure on the depth a little bit, because I feel like you're going to find out whether Samuel Womack can kind of find his footing again, and whether Ambry Thomas is playable now. So there may be an opportunity for somebody else to step up, like one of the undrafted free agents, or guys that like I mentioned, like Ambry Thomas or Samuel Womack. So it's not the end of the world, obviously, because you're talking about your like fifth cornerback, but at the same time, it's news. So I think that it's an opportunity for somebody else to step up and take that spot. I'm not overly concerned about it. I think Luter was a project anyways, and they weren't expecting him to get major playing time as it was. But yeah, anytime you hear that, like a guy that you just drafted is immediately on PUP, yeah, you kind of raises some eyebrows a little bit.
Yeah, and the 49ers did that last year with Clea Davis. Clea Davis spent the majority of the season on the PUP list, but we knew about his injury. He was drafted having experienced an ACL tear, I believe late in his season. So the Luter news is a little on the surprising side, but again, that is depth more than anything, which as we know, the 49ers need as much depth as they can have, because they love to get injured. And so hopefully this is not something that portends for his future or the future with the cornerback group. But it is, again, like you said, newsworthy. But outside of that, again, veterans report next week. I'm actually going, I said this on the last episode, I'm going to open practice on the 27th. I'm excited. Get to hang out with some guests that we've had on the show previously. Jason Aponte, Jordan Elliott. I think Jack Hammer will be there. So excited to hang out with them and see what amounts to at least football activities. But what I wanted to focus on, kind of the question that we will look at for this episode. A week ago, so we're recording this on July 18th, and a week ago on July 11th, a Philadelphia radio host put out a tweet, and all it said was the 49ers have to be the most overrated contender, in quotation marks, the NFL has had going into a season in a very long time. And it begs the question, why are Philly fans and radio personalities so unintelligent? But outside of that, it also begs the question, is that even something to consider? Is this 49ers team overrated in relation to their ability to compete for a Lombardi?
So I think that the first thing that we should note is that it's obviously a team that doesn't know much about the 49ers. It's the fan base that doesn't know much about them. They're not in the same division. They play each other every X amount of years, except unless it's the playoffs, and they are not rivals. So this past
True.
NFC Championship game, it was, I believe, the first time that they played in the playoffs since 1996, I believe.
Mhm.
So they don't see a lot of each other, especially in the playoffs. So I think that part of that is just plain ignorance on their part because they just don't know. I think the other
Word.
part is that there's a weird obsession that Eagles fans have with the 49ers and the Eagles players and media over there. It's a weird obsession that they have. And Debo was on the radio with a Philadelphia radio host, sports host
Yep.
on CBS Sports, and his agent cut off the call because they repeatedly were asking about the championship game, and they can't move off of that. That seems like that's the only topic of discussion when it comes to Eagles fans and the media people. Maybe not the players so much, but definitely the fans and media people. So I think there's this odd fascination with the 49ers that they have because of the circumstances of the NFC Championship game and how the 49ers lost that game. Obviously, losing all of their quarterbacks and
Right.
not even having a chance to compete. Like that just there's no winning in that situation. So I feel like they're seeking some sort of validation for that championship game win when clearly the odds were not even. It was not a fair fight because the Niners didn't
Right.
have a quarterback. And everybody knows that, right? And I think that that's the validation that they're trying to seek on their end is that like, well, you know, we actually won that game and we should get credit for that. But I think that the other half of that is that they lost the Super Bowl 2 weeks later, and this championship game thing is all they can kind of hang their hat on at this point.
Yeah.
Because they ended up losing the Super Bowl in that fashion, blowing the second largest lead in the Super Bowl history in the fourth quarter to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I think it's a little bit of both of those things. But that being said, so first of all, the Eagles, if you call the 49ers overrated, what does that say about your team beating them in the championship game? So you beat an overrated team, though, so you shouldn't get credit then, right? That's what I take away from that. If they're overrated, then it's fine. Then you shouldn't get as much credit as you did because you beat an overrated team. And the second thing is that you're talking about a team in the 49ers that has top 5 players at several positions, and you and Al kind of went through that.
Yeah.
And you're not an overrated team if you have that many blue chip players at that many positions. The only position that I can say that's in question that's going to affect all of this is the quarterback position and how Brock Purdy is going to respond in his first full year of starting.
Yeah. Well, and that's, and largely I think I would imagine, because I'm not going to waste my time listening to that guy's argument because I just think it's pointless. But I would imagine that is part of, if anybody believes that this 49ers team is overrated, it's largely going to hang on the question mark at quarterback, which is fine. I understand that. But here's the reality of this 49ers team and the roster that they have put together. Again, the past 2 episodes, Al and I have gone through ESPN's top 10 in each position, right? The defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, the 49ers have the top ranked left tackle. They have the second ranked tight end. They have the second ranked running back. And they have what we argued was the 11th ranked wide receiver. Deebo Samuel did not make the top 10 in that list. And again, this list is not ESPN's judgment. It is Jeremy Fowler going around and polling executives, scouts, and players and coaches, I believe, and putting together this list of top 10 at the position. And so they listed the top 10, and then the first one that they listed in honorable mention was Deebo Samuel. So again, we kind of interpreted that as 11, right? And then you go to the defensive side of the ball, and they've got the number 1 defensive end. They've got 2 of the top 10 linebackers. They've got the 5th ranked defensive tackle, and they've got the 9th ranked safety. So in ESPN's list, going through the position groups, they have 8 players represented in the top 10 in 8 different positions. Sorry, 7 different positions, right? Because they've got 2 top 10 linebackers. You cannot have a roster with that level of talent and deem that roster overrated, despite what the question marks are at quarterback. Because here's the reality. Yes, they have question marks at quarterback, But the question mark is Brock Purdy going to come back and be able to pilot this offense at the same level he did in the 8 games that he did? Now, we're talking about 30 plus points a game, and then 2 playoff victories, which are impressive. There's no doubt about it. But then you've also got a very talented and respected, and in the locker room at least, unknown in Trey Lance, and then you've got Sam Darnold. But again, to consider them to be overrated, you've also got to consider that Kyle Shanahan cannot get the best out of the 3 quarterbacks, or 4 quarterbacks if you include Brandon Allen, that he has. And at what point in his career, outside of backup level talent at the position in Nick Mullins, has Kyle Shanahan not gotten the best out of his quarterbacks? And the answer is largely never. So again, is this team overrated? No, I don't think you can be overrated with that level of talent, especially in an NFC that is as weak as it currently is.
My question would be, who are the teams that are rated higher than the 49ers at this point? What are the teams roster-wise that you could possibly rate higher? You could say, okay,
in the
Eagles,
NFC or in the NFL?
in the NFC, for just in the conference, right? Like you could say the Eagles.
I think there's only 2.
Yeah, the Eagles and maybe the Cowboys, maybe.
Right. Those would be the 2 that I think people would say yes to. And it's, again, largely because of the quarterback position.
Right. So then you're talking about the 3rd ranked roster in the NFC. I don't see how that's overrated, right? They're clearly the best team in their division. The 49ers are. They are better than most of the other contenders. They've beaten Dallas twice now in the playoffs. And I just don't see how anybody could look beyond that. So I think it's just a lot of hot take stuff, a lot of ridiculous stuff coming from their end. And I think
Certainly.
that he accomplished what he needed to accomplish and put that out there, and it was ridiculous. But look, we're going to find out once the season comes, because even on their end, if we want to talk about what Philadelphia did, Jalen Hurts has only had 1 really good season. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. He's had 1 good season. He had that mega contract, and now let's see what he does. Let's see if he can stack that again. So I think that there's a lot of unknowns on their end as well. Like, they have a great roster. They have a really good team. They had a really good draft. So there's nothing to be taken away from them. But again,
they lost both of their coordinators, though. They lost both of their coordinators. And I don't believe in Jonathan Gannon. I don't think he's a good defensive coordinator. I don't think their defense was all that great. I think they had a lot of talent, but I don't think it had anything to do with Jonathan Gannon. To be perfectly honest, I'm thrilled that Jonathan Gannon is a coach in the NFC West, because I don't think he's going to do anything. But I do think the loss of Shane Steichen is huge, because that offense did not look like it looked last season in 2021. And Shane Steichen wasn't there. Or sorry, 2021. And Shane Steichen wasn't there. Shane Steichen was there last year. He came last year from Los Angeles, from the Chargers, and really turbocharged that offense. Now, can Nick Sirianni pick up where Steichen left off? Maybe, but we don't know that. We don't know that. So there's question marks there too. I don't think that their roster talent is undeniable. We can't, it is what it is, but there are still question marks there. But again, for the 49ers, the biggest question mark, and we've spent two episodes not talking about the quarterback position, which might be a record for a 49ers podcast. But we do have to talk about the quarterback position when we ask this question: are the 49ers overrated? Because largely that question stems, like we said, from the question mark under center. And I thought it was interesting. Albert Breer. The boss man himself, David Bonilla, put out an article on the Web Zone today, and Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated was on Colin Cowherd's show, and they talked about the 49ers quarterback situation, specifically why the 49ers drafted Trey Lance. And I thought he had some interesting things to say. And it really backs up a lot of what I have been saying during this offseason about the 49ers quarterback situation. And what Breer said was that, talking about Trey Lance and Mac Jones, he said those were the two guys that, or Shanahan said those were the two guys that we were locked in on from the beginning. And if we never moved up to number 3, we would have never had the chance to learn more about Trey. Right. So that's why they made the move. They were locked in on those two. They thought maybe they could get Jones at 12, but they didn't think they had any chance to learn more about Trey if they didn't move up. And so Albert Breer, like I said, joined Colin Cowherd and said a big part of the Niners picking Trey Lance over Mac Jones in 2021 was because so many teams are now running the Niners offense and so many teams are defending the Niners offense in practice. And so he felt like, how do we add on to the offense? How do we change the dynamic of the offense? How do we be a little bit different than the other people who are running my offense in other places? And I thought that was interesting. And I think a lot of people have talked about that, about how Kyle Shanahan needed to evolve his offense. And the best way that he could do that, and Shanahan talked about it, was to get a guy like Trey Lance, or really what they said was a threat to run the ball, right? Because then you force the other team to play 11 on 11 defense, which automatically gives the offense the advantage. But what I think is interesting here is this question: how do we change the dynamic of the offense, or how do we add on to the offense? They did that by drafting Trey Lance, and then they handed over to Trey Lance. But then Trey Lance got injured at the beginning of last season, and what did they do? What did they do? They traded for Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey has now been what they needed to evolve the offense, to add to the offense, to change the dynamic to the offense. But my question is, why not add both Christian McCaffrey and this quarterback that you already thought, hey, this is a guy that can help me evolve the offense? And that's really, I went on TED H6, TED Talks Ball, has a YouTube channel, and it talked about this idea that it still seems odd to me that this team is not willing at this point to see what they have in Trey Lance for the sake of winning in this window that they currently have. Because in the NFL, your biggest window, right? And Joe Burrow has said this. Joe Burrow said, Cincinnati's Super Bowl window is as long as I'm here. I love that. It's one of my favorite quotes. Their Super Bowl window is as long as I'm here. That's the best. That's the easiest. That's the quickest way to open a window in the NFL, is to have an elite quarterback. You thought you got that in Trey Lance. He got injured. You didn't get to evaluate it. Brock Purdy came in and played a great 8 games, and I'm not taking anything away from him. But is 8 games enough to move you off of the guy that you traded a haul for, that you thought could help you evolve the offense? Because what Breer says about Brock Purdy was that once Purdy came in, said he ran the offense the way that Shanahan wants the offense run, which is why Shanahan loves guys like Kirk Cousins and Jimmy Garoppolo. But Shanahan admitted so much, in as much that maybe that's not enough anymore. And so it's just, to me, you got to see what you have in Trey Lance. You just have to. And that doesn't mean that you have to hand it to him and that this is his season. But why rush Brock Purdy back? Why not put him on the pup? Let him sit for the first 4 weeks of the season, see what you have in Trey Lance. And if you're cooking with gas, then you keep going. But if not, if you're 2-2 or 1-3, which I have a hard time believing they'd be based on their schedule, then you've got the guy that you're ready to move on to coming off pup and ready in week 5.
So here's the criticism I have for Kyle about the quarterback position. I feel like you mentioned, Albert Breer mentioned that Kyle prefers quarterbacks that will run his system the way that he needs it to be run. And we've talked about it on the show before, where he wants a quarterback, Al says, Al described it as hit the B button and the ball goes there, right?
Right.
That's what Kyle wants. Hit the B button, the ball goes there. So where I am kind of reserved in judgment on that is that you sometimes have situations in games and seasons and whatever it may be, like of the course of any period of time where your scheme is not working for any reason. You could have injuries, you could have the other team just playing a great game, you could have weather. There's any number of reasons that will equalize a game, even if you have the better roster. And that's just the way the NFL is, right? It's about parity. So I feel like you have to be able to provide something different if you want to be able to win those tough games. And that means that you have to be able to operate outside of the box and outside of your scheme at some point during that game or for the entire game. And the argument that I make for that is if you look at coaches like Andy Reid or Bill Belichick or any of the great coaches, Pete Carroll, any of the great coaches in the NFL, when they need to win a game, it doesn't matter. They will pull whatever they need to pull to win the game. I feel like Kyle doesn't have that ability to deviate off of his script and off of the game plan to be able to win a game like that. And you could argue that's why he doesn't have a Super Bowl ring on his hand, either as a coordinator or as a head coach, is that he was not able to deviate off of the game plan. Debo, as we have talked ad nauseum in the Super Bowl loss against Kansas City, did not get the ball in the fourth quarter. He was the best player on offense that entire game, did not even touch the ball in the fourth quarter. There was the Rams game, the championship game, where on 3rd and 2 and 4th and 2, Kyle called two vanilla run plays, or 2nd and 1 and 3rd and 2. Kyle called two vanilla run plays at the middle, then punted from the Rams 40-yard line. Like, it's just, I question that sort of ability that Kyle has to be able to go outside of the box. And if you have a quarterback that's just executing what you tell him to execute, it doesn't help that, because oftentimes when a quarterback goes off script, it's because things are breaking down and you need to make a play. And it means that you don't necessarily hit the B button, right? You go off the script and you find somebody else. An example is this. On 3rd and 15 in the Super Bowl against Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes took an extra 3 or 4 steps on his 7-step drop to be able to give himself time to be able to get that ball off, because he was not going to take a sack in that scenario. He ensured the fact that, hey, I need to get this ball off no matter what, because if I don't, this game is basically over, right? That was the inflection point in that game that changed everything. He went off script to do that, right? He did that on his own. And while you can argue that it's Patrick Mahomes and he's the best quarterback in the NFL and all this stuff, but the point still remains that you need to be able to, number one, have a quarterback go off script to be able to make some of those plays when it counts in crucial moments. And number two, allow them to be able to do that. And I feel like there is this thought out there that Kyle will not allow his quarterbacks to go off script, or that he will lose patience with them if they go off script too much. And I wonder if that's happened with Trey, where there was some freewheeling going on and Kyle just didn't like it and he got impatient with him. Like, look, Kyle's notoriously impatient with quarterbacks. We know this. He's notoriously impatient with how his offense is run, and very particular about it. He's notoriously impatient with quarterbacks. That's why he hasn't been able to settle on one in 7 years. So the concern that I have with Brock Purdy is that there was some freewheeling going on there. There was some off-script playing going on, and that's what made him successful down the stretch. My concern is that Kyle will try to rein him in and try to make him something that he's not. And it's the same concern I have with Trey, where Kyle didn't really know how to use him because he didn't know what he had in him, so they just started using him as a battering ram. And Trey's not a good runner. Like, it's not like Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts running, or Josh Allen running. Trey is a clumsy runner. We have documented that. We know that. So I don't know if he's going to be able to make anything out of him, because I don't know what he has in him. And that's to your point. Like, if they never find out, then Trey will never have a chance here.
Right. Well, and that's again what Breer really talked about when he was on Coward. He said, and then he winds up back in the place with Brock Purdy where he's running his offense again, because he said that what Shanahan loves about guys like Kirk Cousins, Matt Schaub, and Brock Purdy is that they can operate his offense the way that he envisions it needs, and needs was in italics, needs to be run. And so he says, and then he winds winds up back in the place with Brock Purdy where he's running his offense again. So part of this could come down to what Kyle Shanahan wants. I mean, does he want Brock Purdy, who's going to run his offense as prescribed, who's kind of got the Kirk Cousins things going on? Or does he still have it in his head, like, I want to add a little something here and some athleticism and arm strength, which is the idea of bringing Trey Lance in. And so, Breer clarified he still thinks Purdy is going to start or be QB1 if he's healthy week 1. But he said, if there's a coach in the league who's shown us that he's willing to change his mind and doesn't care what anyone else thinks and is just going to play the best player, I think Kyle Shanahan would be that coach, at least on offense. And so, it's interesting because to me, Breer is the first one in a long time to say, hey, you know what? Like, I think Purdy is going to be the quarterback come week 1 if he's healthy, but I'm not writing off Trey Lance because of the reason that Shanahan went to get him in the first place. And I feel like that's kind of been the argument is you went and got this guy for a reason. Don't throw him away because you had another quarterback come in and have a stretch of success. Granted, it was significant success. And again, I'm not arguing that Brock Purdy can't repeat it. I'm not arguing that Brock Purdy shouldn't be the quarterback. I am simply saying, if you are Kyle Shanahan and you have Fort Knox level job security and you traded a grip to go get a quarterback because you felt like he could evolve your offense and you wanted him to sit for a year and then you were ready to put him in and he got injured in the 5th quarter of play in the season and you ended up striking gold with this 7th round rookie who played really well for 8 games. Are those 8 games enough to not see what you have in this kid that you believed in enough to draft 3 overall? When we had Jack Hammer on, Jack said that there wasn't anything that Purdy did last season that he doesn't feel is that he can reproduce this coming season. And I agree to a certain extent. But again, the question mark still comes with the elbow and how long it's going to take to fully recover and get back to where he was. And that's where I'm like, again, 4 games, right? Start Purdy on the pup. Give Lance 4 games, right? As long as Lance earns it in camp, right? If Lance can't beat Darnold in camp, this conversation is moot. It doesn't matter, right? That is worst case scenario. I don't anticipate that happening. So then it's like, hey, let's give him 4 games, right? Let Purdy continue to recover 4 more weeks, right? Let's make sure that arm is where it needs to be. And at the end of 4 weeks, if we're 4-0 and we're scoring 23 points or more a game, then you keep riding the hot hand until that hand is not hot anymore, because you know that you've got this guy in your back pocket. And so, like I said, with that level of job security, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I want to see what I have in the kid before I jettison him off somewhere else. Because again, I look like an idiot if I don't do that. We ship him off, he blossoms somewhere else, and Purdy doesn't, right? Again, do we know whether that will happen or not? No. And is this a business of winning? 100%. And like I said, I don't anticipate them losing with Trey Lance at the helm, right? I don't. I think he would be fine. It's Kyle Shanahan. It's a Kyle Shanahan offense. It's a Kyle Shanahan offense with Christian McCaffrey, right? That's the other thing. You saw Brock Purdy with Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. What could that offense look like with Trey Lance as a threat running out of the backfield? Is he going to run outside zone? No. Is he athletic enough to do that? No. Have we found that out now? Yes. Is that disappointing? Sure. Right. But he's still a runner, right? Mm-hmm. He's still athletic. He still, has a rocket arm. Let's just see what we have. And that's my biggest argument is you got to see what you have before you move off of this kid, because you traded a lot for him. And does that matter now? No. But it still should play in the back of your mind. Hey, not only did we trade a lot, but I really believed in this kid when we drafted him. And a year of sitting and 5 quarters of play before getting hurt isn't enough for me to be like, yep, time to move on. It just isn't. And I hope it's not for Kyle Shanahan either.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like all these questions will be answered in time. I really like when Sam Darnold was signed, I thought that it was a good QB3 signing because that's the guy, the veteran guy that you keep as your practice squad back, whatever it is, right? Like the guy that can come in and run the offense. But then when the thought came in and the rumors came in that he's competing for the backup spot with Trey, I was just like, what's going on here? What are we even doing? Because if you're willing to even give up on Trey as a backup without even seeing him play, it just seems so short-sighted to me. And I think that, again, that's where the disappointment for me in this whole situation lies, is everything seems so short-sighted with this. From the drafting of Trey itself, giving up those 3 first-round picks instead of either waiting for a quarterback or rolling with Jimmy Garoppolo for another year, which is what they did anyways, to the way that they played Jimmy over Trey when Trey was drafted. Trey probably should have started more games or played all of that season, because then we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. That plus the way that they used him at the beginning of last year, and it was just kind of a haphazard, we don't know what we have here, we're just going to kind of fly by the seat of our pants. And then now, as I mentioned, Sam Darnold coming in as the potential backup to Brock Purdy. It's just there have been many missteps throughout this whole process that they've had. But I think that, look, it's very hard to argue with what Brock Purdy did. It's very hard to argue with that because
and you can't argue with what he did.
You can, but I think that there's something to be said about keeping Trey Lance as an insurance policy should Brock Purdy falter, because you don't know what you're going to get out of him in the second season.
Right.
What if he goes 0-4 in his first 4 starts? You have to do something to salvage your season. So I'm not opposed to that, and I think that that's hopefully something that they can do. But look, when it comes down to it, I feel like it's an uphill battle for Trey. We all know this, and I feel like there's very little that Trey can do to push Brock Purdy for the starting job outside of Brock Purdy ending up on the pup to start the season. So for me, I just want the best quarterback possible, right? Whether it's Trey, whether it's Brock Purdy, whether it's Sam Darnold, but I don't think it is going to be Sam Darnold. I just want the best quarterback for this team to lead them to the Super Bowl, because they're close. They're very close to getting over that hump. They've been on the cusp for several years now.
And honestly, with this roster, if they can just get competent quarterback play, they're going to win a lot of games. If they can get good to great quarterback play, they're going to be hard to beat, which means that no, Elliot, can't remember your last name, and it doesn't matter. The 49ers are not overrated as Super Bowl contenders. And I don't think there's anybody outside of Philadelphia who would argue against that. Everybody else recognizes what this team is, what their talent level is, and what they can accomplish. The big question mark, what is going to happen at quarterback? And that will be answered as camp starts next week. Zain, I hope that you start to feel better soon. Safe travels down to Chicago, and we will talk with you next week when you're back home.
All right, buddy.
All right. For our Canadian friend, Zain Naqvi, I'm Brian Renick. This has been another episode of the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast on the Odyssey Network. We will see you guys later.
Peace.